we are going to cover PALANTlR because this is something that everybody should be focused on. You know, Q is, they got pictures of China and whatever, but I do not like looking and playing games all the time. I need to look at information and know what I'm looking at, and I can't always play these games. So we're going to look at PALANTlR. We're going to look at 2 articles. Here we go. PALANTlR, the company that knows too much. Am I my cousin's keeper? That's the question to ask in the story still emerging of Peter Thiel's PALANTlR, the giant private surveillance company created by a tech billionaire. Hold on, am I recording? Yeah. Created by a tech billionaire obsessed with making himself immortal and destroying his enemies in the press, is contracting with American police forces to secretly provide them with systems designed for our wars of foreign occupation that supposedly find criminals before they commit crimes, partially by mapping out family and social networks. Did I mention that the company is named after the seeing stones in the Lord of the Rings that leave some of those who use them mad with power? We, as in judges and lawmakers and the public, are only learning now about the New Orleans Police Department's ongoing work for 6 years with the so-called predictive policing program of PALANTlR, thanks to one dogged journalist, Ali Winston. Go read his piece at tech website The Verge. It's nuts. We're going to do that next. There's no sign PALANTlR's system has actually helped bring crime down, and plenty of signs that bad things have grown in the darkness after the company hooked up with the mayor and police department through Clinton pal James Carville and his wife, Mary Madeline. The CEO of the company, called PALANTlR, said they wanted to do some charitable work, and what I think. Carville told a radio host in 2014 in a rare and little noticed at the time public mention of the program, in which he didn't mention he was a paid consultant for the company. He went on, "We were able to, at no cost to the city, start integrating data and predict and intervene as to where these conflicts were going to be arising. We've seen probably a third of a reduction in our murder rate since this project started." There's not much to back up his claim that the program helped bring down the murder rate. Now back up, down. It's hard to say anything with confidence about what's effectively a black box. But we do know predictive data and algorithms in Chicago and other cities have had discrimination baked into their code. "We're kind of a prototype," Madeline said in the same interview. "Unless you're the cousin of some drug dealer that went bad, you're going to be okay." So the cousin of some drug dealer. So the cousin's not guilty. So let's read that again. "We're kind of a prototype," Madeline said in the same interview. "Unless you're the cousin of some drug dealer that went bad, you're going to be okay." Halt! What does the cousin have to do with the guy dealing drugs? He's just the cousin. He happens to be related to him. So, what am I reading right now? Okay. Speaking of charity, after Hurricane Sandy hit there in 2012, PALANTlR lent a system they developed for our military in Iraq to Team Rubicon, a high-profile venture of former veterans you may recall from the T-Mobile ad featuring them in this year's Super Bowl. Rubicon, in turn, used PALANTlR's tools to dispatch volunteers from Occupy Sandy to get food and medicine to tenants trapped in storm-struck NYCHA towers in a much more efficient aid delivery system than the feds or the city provided. The same old oligarch to veterans, the occupiers pipeline. That aid also served as a free domestic beta test in a PR coup for PALANTlR, which still has headlines like "From Wartime Technology Comes Hurricane Relief" on its website more than 5 years later. That was separate from PALANTlR'S years of for-profit work with the NYPD, which shades of New Orleans was kept secret for security reasons and never sent to our city council for approval or oversight. It's not just this one company selling secret systems for safety, of course. After 5 years, the NYPD appears to have mostly cut ties with the tech firm and is now using its own software and IBM products to map connections. The same IBM that was back in World War II that helped round up the Jews for concentration camps. Just to let you know. The department also has a facial recognition tool. I emphasize appears since a lawsuit now being heard in a Manhattan court is about NYPD's failure to provide public information about the program. The NYPD in turn is arguing that its databases of many of our faces is really none of our business for our own safety. In Baltimore, police brass used their side pod of charitable foundation money for a system designed for use in Iraq by another private company, Persistent Surveillance Systems, or PSS. For 8 months, the company flew small planes over the city that sent live footage to the police analyst and also stored that footage so it could be rewound. That's a little bit misleading. They have this in LA. It's a DVR over the city. It's basically like, have you ever seen that movie Deja Vu? Very reminiscent of that. Those eyes in the sky can't recognize car models, let alone people or faces, but just hook it up with Google and you got the beast system. But that's just a short-term engineering problem, they say. Not even the mayor knew the police were doing this until Bloomberg Business Week reported it. Great, the mayor doesn't even know what's going on. He has to read it in Bloomberg. In Los Angeles, here it is. In Los Angeles, the county sheriff's department gave those same flights a secret 9-day trial over Compton. BS. I think this is a little misleading because they had this in operation for more than 9 days. In Los Angeles, the sheriff's department gave those same flights a secret 9-day trial over Compton, and the police department pays for its PALANTlR spending through its foundation to keep it off the books and away from oversight. This is the DVR I was talking about. This is the DVR I was talking about. There's much more already here and coming soon to track your car and listen to your phone calls and recognize your face and look inside your house from police and businesses servicing them as the Internet of Things starts to come of age. This, warning, this is bad. This is bad. This is what we need to stop. There needs to be an outrage because, listen, are people just going to sit around while the thing that is going to enslave and kill them is built all around them? Something for the people with cousins to think about. End of that story. Number 2, Verge. PALANTlR has secretly been using New Orleans as a test or something. Let me, hold on, it just did something weird. Don't screw with me now. So here, let's look at this little thing that they got going on. Great. Beast system, right in your face. Search for ... We're all enemy of the state. PALANTlR has secretly been using New Orleans to test its predictive policing technology. PALANTlR deployed a predictive policing system in New Orleans that even city council members don't know about. In May and June 2013, when New Orleans' murder rate was the highest, 6th highest in the U.S., the Orleans Parish District Attorney handed down 2 landmark racketeering indictments against dozens of men accused of membership in 2 violent Central City drug trafficking gangs, 3NG and the 110ers. Members of both gangs stood accused of committing 25 murders as well as several attempted killings and armed robberies. Subsequent investigations by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the FBI and local agencies produced further RICO indictments, including that of a 22-year-old man named Evans Easy Lewis, a member of a gang called the 39ers, who is accused of participating in a drug distribution ring and several murders. According to Ronzel Serpas, the department's chief at the time, one of the tools used by the New Orleans Police Department to identify members of gangs like 3NG and the 39ers came from Silicon Valley company called PALANTlR. The company provided software to a secretive NOPD program that traced people's ties to other gang members, outlined criminal histories, analyzed social media, and predicted the likelihood that individuals will commit violence or become a victim. As part of the discovery process in Lewis's trial, the government turned over more than 60,000 pages of documents detailing evidence gathered against him from confidential informants, ballistics, and other sources, but they made no mention of the NOPD's partnership with PALANTlR, according to a source familiar with the 39ers trial. The program began in 2012 as a partnership between New Orleans Police and PALANTlR Technologies, a data mining firm founded with seed money from the CIA's venture capital firm. According to interviews and documents obtained by The Verge, the initiative was essentially a predictive policing program, similar to the Heat List in Chicago, that purports to predict which people are likely drivers or victims of violence. The partnership has been extended 3 times, with a third extension scheduled to expire February 21, 2018. The city of New Orleans and PALANTlR have not responded to questions about the program's current status. Predictive policing technology has proven highly controversial, whether it is implemented, but in New Orleans, the program escaped public notice, partially because PALANTlR established it as a philanthropic relationship with the city through Mayor Mitch Landrieu's signature NOLA for Life program. So the mayor didn't know about it, but it's done through his signature NOLL Life program? Give me a break. Thanks to its philanthropic status, as well as New Orleans' strong mayor model of government, the agreement never passed through a public procurement process. No one in New Orleans even knows about this, to my knowledge. In fact, key city council members and attorneys contacted by The Verge had no idea that the city had any sort of relationship with PALANTlR, nor were they aware that PALANTlR used its program in New Orleans to market its services to another law enforcement agency for a multi-million-dollar contract. Even James Carville, the political operative instrumental in bringing about PALANTlR's collaboration with NOPD, said that the program was not public knowledge. No one in New Orleans even knows about this, to my knowledge, he said. More than a half-decade after the partnership with New Orleans began, PALANTlR has patented at least one crime forecasting system and has sold similar software to foreign intelligence services for predicting the likelihood of individuals to commit terrorism. Even within the law enforcement community, there are concerns about the potential civil liberties implications of the sort of individualized prediction PALANTlR developed in New Orleans, and whether it's appropriate for American criminal justice system. It's not the right tool for logical and state law enforcement, or local state and law enforcement. So it's not the right tool. They're creating a target list. But we're not after Al-Qaeda in Syria, said a former law enforcement official who has observed PALANTlR's work firsthand, as well as the company's sales pitches for predictive policing. The former official spoke on condition of anonymity. A lot of condition of anonymity going around. To freely discuss their concerns with data mining and predictive policing. PALANTlR is a great example of an absolutely ridiculous amount of money spent on a tech tool that may have some application, the former official said. However, it's not the right tool for local and state law enforcement. 6 years ago, one of the world's most secretive and powerful tech firms, 6 years ago, one of the world's most secretive and powerful tech firms developed a contagious, intelligent product in a city that has served as a neoliberal laboratory for everything from charter schools to radical housing reform since Hurricane Katrina. Because the program was never public, important questions about its basic functioning, risk for bias, and overall propriety were never answered. ... You got the hexagon. Co-founded in 2004 by Alexander Karp and Peter Thiel, the company's single largest shareholder, Palantir Technologies' rapid ascent to becoming one of the highest valued private Silicon Valley companies has been driven by lucrative contracts with the Pentagon and United States intelligence services, as well as foreign security services. In recent years, Palantir has sought to expand its data fusion and analysis business to private sector with mixed success. Prediction is not new territory for Palantir. Since at least 2009, Palantir was used by the Pentagon to predict the location of improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, in Afghanistan and Iraq, a wartime risk assessment program absent the civil liberties concerns that come with individualized predictive policing. Its commercial software platform, Metropolis, also reportedly uses predictive analytics to help businesses develop consumer markets and streamline investments. But before 2012, with the New Orleans program, there is no publicly available record that Palantir has ventured into predictive policing. Interest and investment in predictive policing technology accelerated after 2009 when the National Institute of Justice began issuing grants for pilot projects in crime forecasting. Those grants underpin some of the best known and most scrutinized predictive policing efforts in Chicago and Los Angeles. This is exactly what I was talking about. The DVR that's in the sky. Programs vary, and the algorithms are often proprietary, but they are all aimed to suggest vast stores of data, geography, criminal records, the weather, social media histories, and make predictions about individuals or places likely to be involved in a crime. In the following years, many startup firms have struggled to monetize the crime-fighting method, most notably PREDlCTlVE, a California startup whose contract awards have founded after an initial blitz of publicity in the early 2010. Before 2012, with the New Orleans program, there is no publicly available record that Palantir had ventured into predictive policing. As more departments and companies began experimenting with predictive policing, government-funded research cast doubts on its efficacy, and independent academics found it can have a desperate impact on poor communities of color. 2016 study reverse-engineered PREDlCTlVE's algorithm and found that it replicated systematic bias against over-policed communities of color, and that historical crime data did not accurately predict future criminal activity. One of the researchers, a Michigan State PhD candidate named William Isaac, had not previously heard of New Orleans' partnership with Palantir, but he recognized the data mapping model at the heart of the program. Quote, "I think the data they're using, there are serious questions about its predictive power. We've seen very little about its ability to forecast violent crime," Isaac said. According to interviews and documents obtained by The Verge, Palantir first approached New Orleans in 2012 through a well-known intermediary, James Carville, the Democratic Party power broker and architect of Bill Clinton's successful '92 presidential campaign. Carville is a paid advisor of Palantir, whose involvement with the data mining company dates back to at least 2011. "I am the sole driver of that project." In an interview, Carville told The Verge that he was the impetus for the collaboration between Palantir and New Orleans. "I am the sole driver of that project. It was entirely my idea," said Carville. adding that he and Palantir CEO Alex Karp flew down to New Orleans to meet with Mayor Landrieu. To me, it was a case of morality. Young people were shooting each other and the public wasn't as involved as they should be. The documents outlining, this is BS, that, we wanted to help you guys. The documents outlining Palantir's relationship with New Orleans describe the company's role as pro bono and philanthropic. It was basically when you come up with a new product, you give it to people for free because they don't know of you yet. It's not philanthropic. Mentioned its work in New Orleans on its annual philanthropic report, characterizing the effort as collaborative network analysis for law enforcement and other city stakeholders. Carville's remarks on a Bay Area public radio station 4 years ago elucidate how Palantir's relationship with the city came about. In a January 2014 appearance on KQED's Forum talk show, Carville and his wife, Mary Madeline, touted Palantir's work in New Orleans as a major driver in the city's 2-year decline in the murder rate. Quote, the CEO of a company called Palantir, the CEO, a guy named Alex Karp, said that they wanted to do some charitable work. And what I think, I said, we really have a really horrific crime rate in New Orleans. Carville told KQED Forum's host Michael Krasny, without mentioning his professional relationship to Palantir. Quote, and so he came down and met with our mayor. They both had the same reaction as to the utter immorality of young people killing other young people and society not doing anything about it. And we were able to, at no cost to the city, start integrating data and predict and intervene as to where these conflicts were going to be arising. We've seen probably a third of a reduction in our murder rate since this project started. Madeline, who is also a political consultant, made it clear to Cransey that the prediction work being done with NOPD by the Palo Alto firm was both a prototype and potentially could sweep up innocent people. Unless you're the cousin of some drug dealer that went bad, you're going to be okay. Do I need to say anything more? This is like the most disturbing line I've ever read. If you're in the family of somebody that does a crime, this should be so disturbing to you. We're kind of a prototype, said Madeline. Unless you're the cousin of some drug dealer that went bad, you're going to be okay. Ronald Sturpas, the New Orleans chief of police from 2010 through August 2014, recalled his initial contact with Palantir's staff during a meeting initiated by Mayor Landrieu's office. They came over and discussed the kind of work they do in theaters of war, the kind of work they do in other parts of the world, Sturpas said during an interview in his office at Loyola University. My impression was Palantir was also interested in trying to develop products that could do some predicting of crime. The relationship between New Orleans and Palantir was finalized on February 23, 2012, when Mayor Landrieu signed an agreement granting New Orleans free access to the firm's public sector data integration platform. Licenses and tech support for Palantir's law enforcement platform can run to millions of dollars annually, according to an audit of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Yeah, this thing is up and running in LA. In January 2013, New Orleans would also allow Palantir to use its law enforcement account for LexisNexis AccuRent product, which is comprised of millions of searchable public records, court filings, licenses, addresses, phone numbers, and social media data. The firm also got free access to city criminal and non-criminal data in order to train its software for crime forecasting. Neither the residents of New Orleans nor key city council members, whose job it is to oversee the use of municipal data, were aware of Palantir's access to reams of their data. PALANTlR has a history of secrecy, and New Orleans is not the only instance of a company conducting business with government agencies through associated nonprofits, avoiding the public procurement process. PALANTlR provides data analysts and integration for the Los Angeles Police Department, but the arrangement was made through the LA Police Foundation rather than the LAPD itself. In New York, the firm's contract was not disclosed by the city comptroller for security reasons. NYPD does this with surveillance equipment contracts, and it was never brought to the city council for approval. PALANTlR'S work with NYPD only became public when documents about its tumultuous relationship with the country's largest police force were leaked to BuzzFeed reporter William Alden. In New Orleans, according to extensive reporting by The Verge, Mayor Landrieu's office, the city's attorney, and the NOPD appear to be the only entities aware of the firm's work in the city. Key members of the city council were not aware of PALANTlR'S work in New Orleans until approached by The Verge. The PALANTlR partnership would have likely received more scrutiny from the city council had it been itemized in a budget, but the council's approval isn't required for such a program. The structure of city government in New Orleans is predicated on a strong mayor model, where the council does not have approval authority over contracts or policies for the city police department. Cities around the country have recently begun to grapple with the question of it, and now municipalities should regulate data sharing and privacy. Some cities like Seattle and Oakland have passed legislation establishing committees to craft guidelines and conduct oversight, while others like New York are discussing what role city council should play regarding privacy in the digital age. I don't think there's anyone in the council that would say that they were aware that this had ever even occurred. Several civil and criminal attorneys who were heavily involved with the New Orleans criminal justice system were also unaware of any predictive policing efforts by the NOPD. Multiple criminal attorneys had never seen PALANTlR analytic products as a part of any discovery materials turned over to them in the course of trial cases, although such analysis would typically be required to be given in defense counsel if it had been used as part of an NOPD investigation. Jason Williams, the president of the New Orleans City, you see what they're saying? They're saying that they're not using it in court, so they're basically using this thing is coming up and doing the work for them, and then they are passing it off when they commit these people, and they're leaving out what did it, what did it, and how they were tipped off and whatever. But this is very deceptive. Jason Williams, the president of the New Orleans City Council and a former defense attorney, reviewed documentation of PALANTlR'S collaboration with NOPD at the request of The Verge. Williams said he had never heard of the company's involvement with NOPD. Quote, I don't think there's anyone in the council that would say that they were aware that this had even occurred, because this was not part and parcel to any of our budget allocations or our oversight, Williams said in an interview during a council meeting. Williams, who also served as a criminal court judge before his election to the city council in 2012, said he wasn't necessarily opposed to using data-driven methods to help at-risk New Orleanians. This is a quote, my primary concern would be how this was used in my city. If it was used to identify marginalized people that are at risk of being harmed, to stop them from being harmed, I'm going to have a whole different appreciation of that than I'm going to have if this system was used nefariously. It's almost as if New Orleans were contracting its own version of the NSA. Councilwoman Susan Gaudry, who chairs the council's Criminal Justice Committee and has been in office since 2010, was also unaware of New Orleans' partnership with PALANTlR and NOPD's crime forecasting work. When shown NOPD documentation of the program, Gaudry told The Verge she had never encountered it before. The Verge shared documentation of the program with a group of New Orleans civil rights attorneys. None were previously aware of NOPD's prediction work, though no one had heard rumors that Palantir was collaborating with NOPD and that they were troubled by the secrecy that surrounded the program. It's especially disturbing that this level of intrusion research into the lives of ordinary residents is kept virtually a secret, said Jim Craig, the director of the Louisiana office of the Roderick and Solange MacArthur Justice Center. He reviewed documentation of the program at the Verge's request, compared the predictive policing efforts to signals intelligence work. It's almost as if New Orleans were contracting its own version of the NSA to conduct 24/7 surveillance of the lives of its people. Authorities, he believes, have kept the program under wraps because it would elicit widespread outrage. So they kept it secret. Right now, people are outraged about traffic cameras and have no idea this data mining project is ongoing, Craig said. The South is still a place where people very much value their privacy. This makes me so pissed. Nicholas Carasso or whatever and Robin Engel are two University of Cincinnati professors who conducted a recent evaluation of the New Orleans violence reduction strategy that Palantir was used for and helped design an NOPD gang database that the Palantir forecasting model draws on. Both Engel and Carasso were unaware of the New Orleans predictive policing efforts, its involvement with Palantir, or even the fact that the database they designed was feeding into the program. Trying to predict who is going to do what based on last year's data is horseshit, Carasso said in an interview. Palantir did sometimes publicly refer to its work in New Orleans. However, none of Palantir's public presentations about the program that The Verge was able to identify went into detail about individualized crime forecasting, scraping of social media data, or the use of social network analysis for crime prediction. Instead, the company represented its work in New Orleans as developing a better understanding of violent crime propensity and designing targeted interventions to protect the city's most vulnerable populations. That's lawyer talk. It's horseshit. Trying to predict who is going to do what based on last year's data is just horseshit. In a public speaking appearance where he touted the efficacy of their work in New Orleans, Courtney Bowman, a Palantir civil liberties engineer heavily involved in the company's work with NOPD, acknowledged that extensive secrecy could deepen the rift between law enforcement and over-policed communities. During a May 6, 2016 presentation at the UC Berkeley School of Information Data Edge Conference, Bowman said these sorts of programs only work if the community is comfortable with the degree to which this type of information is being applied and if they're aware of how the information is being used. The city of New Orleans and Palantir both declined requests for comment about how their partnership was formed and what sort of input other elected officials and the public had into the data mining firm's predictive policing efforts. Ronald Serpas, who ran NOPD when the partnership with Palantir began, said that he believed the city council and public at large should have been informed about the police department's decision to engage in predictive policing with Palantir. The role of logical legislators and governing bodies in overseeing the sharing of government data is far from settled, but Serpas believes that agreements with firms like Palantir warrant greater scrutiny. It is, to me, something that certainly requires a view, requires a look. Though neither Palantir staff nor current New Orleans officials would talk about the day-to-day functioning of the crime forecasting initiative, documents obtained by The Verge, external studies, and the recollections of former Chief Serpas offer a portrait of how the predictive policing beta test has functioned over the past 6 years. Okay. Palantir's prediction model in New Orleans used an intelligent technique called social network analysis, or SNA, to draw connections between people, places, cars, weapons, addresses, social media posts, and other indica in previously siloed databases. Think of the analysis as a practical version of Mark Lombardi painting that highlights connections between people, places, and events. After entering a query term like a partial license plate, nickname, address, phone number, or social media handle or post, NOPD's analyst would review the information scraped by Palantir software and determine which individuals are at greatest risk of either committing violence or becoming a victim, based on their connection to known victims or assailants. The data on individuals came from information scraped from social media as well as NOPD criminal databases for ballistics, gangs, probation, and parole information, jailhouse phone calls, calls for service, the central case management system, i.e. every case NOPD had on record, and the department's repository of field interview cards. The latter database represents every documented encounter NOPD has with citizens, even those that don't result in arrests. 2010, the Times Picani or whatever revealed that Chief Serpas had mandated that the collection of field interview cards be used as a measure of officer and district performance, resulting in over 70,000 field interview cards filled out in 2011 and 12. That's just horrible. The practice resembled NYPD's stop and frisk program and was instituted with the express purpose of gathering as much intelligence on New Orleanians as possible, regardless of whether or not they committed a crime. A partial license plate, a nickname, an address, phone number, blah, blah, blah. NOPD used a list of potential victims and perpetrators of violence generated by Palantir to target individuals for the city's ceasefire program. Ceasefire is a form of the decades-old carrot and stick strategy developed by David Kennedy, a professor at John Jay College in New York. In the program, law enforcement informs potential offenders with criminal records that they know of their past actions and will prosecute them to the fullest extent if they reoffend. If the subjects choose to cooperate, they are called in to a required meeting as part of their conditions of probation and parole and offered job training, education, potential job replacement, and health services. In New Orleans, the ceasefire program is run under the broader umbrella of NOLA for Life, which is Mayor Landau's pet project that he has funded through millions of dollars from private donors. According to Serpas, the person who initially ran New Orleans' social network analysis from 2013 to 15 was Jeff Asher, a former intelligence agent who joined NOPD from the CIA. If someone had been shot, Serpas explained, Asher would use Palantir software to find people associated with them through field interviews or social media data. This data analysis brings up names and conditions between people on FI's field interview cards, on traffic stops, victim reports, reporting victims of crimes, whatever the case may be. That kind of information is valuable for anybody who's doing an investigation. According to Palantir's own documentation, Asher and his colleagues ran social network analysis of every victim of a fatal or non-fatal shooting in New Orleans from 2011 through 13. Through this technique, with Asher dubbed the NOLA model, the city devised a list of roughly 3,900 people who were at the highest risk of being involved in gun violence because of their connection to a previous shooter or victim. We can identify 30 to 40% shooting victims, Asher claimed at Palantir's 2014 internal conference. Asher declined repeated requests for an interview. The NOLA model. Theoretically, Asher's approach is substantially influenced by research of Andrew Pakakios, or whatever, a Yale professor who tracked violence as if it were a communicable disease spreading through networks of association. However, since his work was cited as the academic underpinning for crime forecasting models employed by PREDlCTLVE and the Chicago Police Department, Pakakios has sought to distance his research from those methods. Once NOPD generated its list of likely shooters and victims, the police department and social service providers for the carrot side of NOLA life would select people who were either incarcerated or on court supervision for a call-in meeting. Mayor Landau's office touted the program frequently, referring to it as an essential part of New Orleans' criminal justice policy. Palantir also claimed credit for helping to break the cycle of violence in New Orleans. Read a passage in the company's 2015 Philanthropy Engineering Report, but its actual impact is unclear. Of the 308 people who participated in call-ins from October 2012 through March 2017, 7 completed vocational training, 9 completed paid work experience, none finished a high school diploma or GED course, 32 were employed at one time or another through referrals. 50 participants were detained following their call-in, and 2 have since died. By contrast, law enforcement vigorously pursued its end of the program from 2012 when new multi-agency gang unit was founded through March 2014. Racketeering indictments escalated. 83 alleged gang members in 8 gangs were indicted in the 16-month period, according to an internal Palantir presentation. The city devised a list of roughly 3,900 people who were at the highest risk of being involved in gun violence. Collins declined precipitously after the first years. According to the city records, 8 group call-ins took place 2012-2014, but only 3 took place in the following 3 years. Robert Goodman, New Orleans native who became a community activist after completing a prison sentence for murder, worked as a responder for the city's ceasefire program until August 2016, discouraging people from engaging in retaliatory violence. Over time, Goodman noticed more of an emphasis on the stick component of the program and more control over the non-punitive aspects of the program by City Hall that he believes undermined the intervention work. It's supposed to be ran by people like us instead of the city trying to dictate to us how this thing should look, he said. As long as they're not putting resources into the hoods, nothing will change. Exactly. You're just putting on Band-Aids. That's exactly right. It's not like they're trying to put in this big thing. After the first 2 years of Palantir's involvement with NOPD, the city saw a marked drop in murders and gun violence, but it was short-lived. Even former NOPD Chief Serpus believes that the preventative effect of calling in dozens of at-risk individuals and indicting dozens of them began to diminish. When we ended up with nearly 9 or 10 indictments, with close to 100 defendants for federal or state RICO violations of killing people in the community, I think we got a lot of people's attention in that criminal environment, Serpa said, referring to the racketeering indictments. But over time, it must have wore off because before I left in August of 14, we could see that things were starting to slide. Nick Carrascio, the University of Cincinnati professor who helped build NOPD's gang database, also worked on an evaluation of New Orleans' ceasefire strategy. He found that New Orleans' overall decline in homicides coincided with the city's implementation of ceasefire program, but the central city neighborhoods targeted by the program did not have statistically significant declines that corresponded with November 2012 onset date. But plainly, the study did not confirm claims by Palantir and city officials that data-driven interventions were behind the temporary drop-off in violent crime. Though the call-ins dropped off, emails obtained by Verge indicate that the NOPD continued to use Palantir for law enforcement. Palantir declined repeated requests for comment, but the emails also show that the company was aware of the potential risks posed by predictive policing algorithms and the negative publicity that comes with them. May 23, 2016, Palantir civil liberties engineer Courtney Bowman responded to a request by NOPD crime analyst Zach Donani about whether PALANTR could help generate numerical rankings for individuals' rank for committing or becoming the victim of a shooting. I have some serious concerns about instituting a rank or numeric scoring approach, Bowman wrote. It's exactly this facet of Chicago's heat list model that has exposed CPD to a great deal of public scrutiny, the email reads, linking the two articles critiquing Chicago's predictive policing approach. The looming concern is that an opaque scoring algorithm substitutes the veneer of a qualitative certainty for more holistic qualitative judgment and human culpability, Bowman wrote. I mean, can you stop it with these words? One of the lasting virtues of the NSA or the SNA work we've done to date is that we've kept human analysts in the loop to ensure that networks are being explored and analyzed in a way that passes the straight-face test. Regardless of the sustainability of New Orleans murder reduction, PALANTR used its work with NOPD to solicit large contracts with other American cities. Later, the company won lucrative contracts for predictive programs with foreign governments. According to emails obtained by The Verge, PALANTR marketing staff first contracted the Chicago Police Department in late 2013 about the possibility of selling a predictive policing package based on the firm's New Orleans work, eventually settling on a $3 million price tag. Through a series of federal grants awarded to CPD beginning in 2009, Chicago police and academics at the Illinois Institute of Technology had already created their own crime forecasting program that assigned a risk score to individuals based on criminal data and social media histories. August 19, 2014, Katie Laidlaw, a marketing executive at PALANTR, emailed Chicago Police Commander Jonathan Landreau. I would like to follow up on connecting with Superintendent McCarthy, specifically to frame potential PALANTR engagement around our proven outcomes in supporting homicide reduction in New Orleans. The emails also show that Chicago police hope to receive grant money from the Department of Homeland Security to fund the PALANTR software acquisition. However, the Chicago Police Department never piloted or purchased PALANTR software. Commander Ludren, who is in charge of Chicago's heat list model of predictive policing and who was on the receiving end of Katie Laidlaw's sales pitch for PALANTR, said in an interview that he was aware of PALANTR's work with other law enforcement agencies but never approved either a test run or purchase of PALANTR software. Though PALANTR did not succeed in selling its New Orleans tested tools to Chicago police, the data mining company has successfully sold forecasting products to foreign security services. In 2016, the Danish National Police and Intelligence Services signed an 84-month contract with PALANTR, reported in the Danish press to have been worth between $14.8 and $41.4 million for a predictive policing predictive technology package meant to identify potential terrorists. According to procurement documents, the program uses law enforcement data like license plate reader records, CCTV video, and police records to make predictions about individuals' likelihood to commit terrorism. Denmark's national legislator had to pass an exemption to the European Union's data protection regulations in order to purchase PALANTR software. Prior to the 2016 contract with Denmark, PALANTR Technologies reported work with law enforcement never mentioned forecasting or prediction capabilities. Last year, the liberal Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that Israel's security services used analytic systems that scraped social media and other data to predict potential lone wolf attackers from Palestinian communities in the West Bank, and that PALANTR was one of only 2 technology companies to provide predictive intelligence systems to Israeli security organizations. The New Orleans project is the first reported instance of PALANTR using social media data as part of the company's social network analysis. I'm not surprised to find out that people are being detained abroad using that information, said New Orleans Council President Jason Williams. pointing out the differences between the legal system of Israel and the United States. My concern is the use of technology to get around the Constitution. That is not something that I would want to see in the United States. Around the country, cities like New York are weighing legislation about how to oversee the algorithms government agencies use to make decisions. These debates have yet to begin in New Orleans, where the city's intractable crime rates take up much of the oxygen in public discourse. However, the secrecy of PALANTlR'S relationship with the NOPD raises red flags to outside observers and prompts questions about how the company's algorithms are being used. William Isaac, Michigan State researcher who has analyzed predictive policing systems for bias, said he has long had suspicions that PALANTlR engaged in some sort of individual forecasting program. They had only publicly acknowledged the extent to which their technology is data deconfliction and visualization. After being walked through the documentation of PALANTlR'S New Orleans project, Isaac said the program was remarkably similar to Chicago's individual heat list model, which a RAND Corporation study found had no impact on violent crime and was overwhelmingly composed of young African American and Latino men with extensive law enforcement contact. If you're trying to predict anything, you need to have some representation across the universe that you're trying to predict. If you're trying to predict crime, you need to have positive and negative examples for every possible offense. Police departments tend to have good data about communities where they are present, but little data about the communities where they do not patrol as vigorously, which tend to be affluent and white. The same flaws that were in the Chicago predictive program are going to be amplified in New Orleans dataset. The secrecy surrounding the NOPD program also raises questions about whether defendants have been given evidence that they have a right to view. Sarah St. Vincent, a researcher at Human Rights Watch, recently published an 18-month investigation into parallel construction, or the practice of law enforcement concealing evidence gathered from surveillance activity. In an interview, St. Vincent said that law enforcement withholding intelligence gathering or analysis like New Orleans predictive policing work effectively kneecaps and checks the checks and balances of the criminal justice system. At the Cato Institute's 2017 surveillance conference in December, St. Vincent raised concerns about why information garnered from predictive policing systems was not appearing in criminal indictments or complaints. It's the role of the judge to evaluate whether the government did in this case was legal. I do think defense attorneys would be right to be concerned about the use of programs that might be inaccurate, discriminatory, or drawing from unconstitutional data. If PALANTlR'S partnership with New Orleans had been public, the issues of legality, transparency, and propriety would have been hashed out in a public forum during an informed discussion with legislators, law enforcement, the company, and the public. For 6 years, that never happened. The article previously stated incorrectly that PALANTlR was the world's 5th most valuable company. It's among the highest valued private companies in Silicon Valley. Phew! That's scary stuff, right? Scary stuff. And you just got all that. Those 2 articles just let you know what's going on. Basically,